Kofi Mensah stands at the threshold of two worlds. As the newly appointed CEO of a Pan-African technology conglomerate, he has inherited not just wealth, but the weight of family legacy and expectation. His relatives circle him with careful smiles, anticipating the fortune that will flow their way. But on the rain-soaked streets of Accra, a young girl named Ama teaches mathematics to other street children beneath a baobab tree, using charcoal and stone. Their worlds exist in separate universes, until a chance encounter on an ordinary Tuesday changes everything. What unfolds is not a simple act of charity, but a profound moral choice. When Kofi discovers that Ama's intellect rivals that of his own children, he faces an impossible decision: honor the family that groomed him for success, or invest his entire inheritance in a child society has already discarded. His family sees betrayal, his colleagues see recklessness, but Kofi sees something his wealth had blinded him to: that true legacy is not measured in what you keep, but in what you give to those the world has forgotten. This is the story of a man who had everything, but understood nothing about human worth until he met a girl who had nothing, but possessed everything that mattered. Chapter 1. The Weight of Inheritance. The office was cold glass and silence. Kofi Mensah sat behind a desk that had belonged to his father and his father's father before him. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Accra's skyline, a landscape of cranes and ambition, wealth rising like steam. His hands trembled as he signed the final documents. CEO. The title felt both inevitable and hollow. That morning, his mother had called 7 times. His brothers had sent a detailed email about estate distribution. His wife had already selected which properties would be theirs. Everyone was calculating, everyone was waiting. Kofi understood the mathematics of his family. They had taught him well. The Mensah fortune was not a blessing. It was a ledger, carefully balanced across generations of expectation. He was 43 years old and had never made a single decision that was truly his own. The inheritance ceremony had been held the previous week. His uncle had placed a gold pen in his hand and said, "Now you carry our name into the future." Kofi had felt the weight of it immediately, not the pen, but the name. The Mensah name was old money, old power, old silence about how that power was acquired. His grandfather had built textile factories. His father had diversified into telecommunications. Kofi was expected to expand further, to multiply, to secure the dynasty for another generation. That evening, he drove through the city alone, something he had not permitted himself in years. His driver had the night off. No security detail, no phone calls, just Kofi and the rain beginning to fall, soft and insistent against the windshield. He took a wrong turn deliberately, driving through neighborhoods he had been taught to avoid. Here the wealth disappeared. Here the streets narrowed and the buildings crumbled into themselves like tired shoulders. He stopped at a traffic light on a street called Osu Lane, where vendors sold roasted corn and the air smelled of smoke and survival. A child tapped on his window, a girl, perhaps 12 years old, barefoot and damp from the rain. She was not begging. She was selling, something small, something crafted. Kofi rolled down the window. "Sir, you want to buy?" Her voice was clear without the desperation he had expected. She held up a small wooden carving, intricate and precise. The craftsmanship was remarkable. "What's your name?" he asked. "Ama, sir, 1 Sidai." He paid her 10 times the price and drove away before she could thank him. In his rear-view mirror, he saw her standing in the rain, holding the crumpled bills as though they might disappear. Something in her stillness, the way she stood, unmoved by her own small fortune, stayed with him. That night, Kofi could not sleep. He turned the wooden carving in his hands, feeling the deliberate cuts, the patience embedded in the wood. Somewhere in this city, In the parts of Accra that his family had taught him were dangerous was a girl who carved like an artist and sold like a pragmatist. She did not have a trust fund, she did not have a family legacy, and yet she had something Kofi could not name, a presence that felt like authenticity in a life built entirely from inheritance. He decided, without knowing why, that he would find her again. Chapter 2. The Girl Beneath the Baobab. The next morning, Kofi retraced his route. Osu Lane in daylight looked different, smaller somehow, and more honest. Vendors arranged their goods with ceremony. Children moved through the streets with purpose, not desperation. He parked his car and walked, drawing stares. A man in a tailored suit carrying a leather briefcase did not belong here. He found her beneath an ancient baobab tree, its trunk wider than a room, its roots gripping the earth like old hands. But she was not selling, she was teaching. Around Amma sat 7 children, ranging in age from perhaps 8 to 14. She stood before them with a stick, drawing equations in the dirt. Her voice was steady, patient, and precise. She was explaining fractions, how to divide something whole into parts, how each part still had value. Kofi watched from a distance, hidden behind a vendor's stall. He watched for nearly an hour as Amma taught without compensation, without recognition, with only the devotion of someone who had discovered that knowledge was the only inheritance worth sharing. One boy was struggling with a concept. Amma redrew the equation, using pebbles to represent the numbers. She did not rush him. She waited until understanding bloomed across his face, and then she smiled, quietly, as though she had witnessed something sacred. When she finally noticed Kofi, there was no surprise in her eyes, only a kind of recognition, as though she had been expecting him all along. "You came back," she said, not a question. "I wanted to thank you properly," he replied, stepping closer, "for the carving. I remember you. You paid too much." She was not accusing him. She was simply stating a fact. "Why did you come back?" Kofi realized he did not have an answer. He had come back because the memory of her standing in the rain, unmoved by small fortune, had cracked something inside him. He had come back because in all his 43 years, surrounded by people who wanted something from him, he had never met someone who wanted nothing. "What's your name?" she asked. "Kofi." "Well, Kofi, if you want to help, you can help." She handed him the stick. "Teach them for a while. I have to find water. The well is far today." She left before he could respond. Kofi stood holding the stick, facing 7 children who regarded him with silent skepticism. He had sat in board meetings with presidents. He had negotiated contracts worth millions. But standing before these 7 children, he felt entirely unprepared. He began to teach, and something shifted inside him, something that had been waiting to move for decades. By the time Amma returned with water balanced on her head, the children were laughing at one of Kofi's jokes, and he was smiling in a way that felt genuine for the first time in years. Chapter 3. The World Before. Over the following weeks, Kofi's life split into 2 distinct narratives. In the mornings and afternoons, he was CEO, signing documents, attending meetings, managing the empire his family had built. In the evenings, he became Kofi, the man beneath the baobab tree, teaching mathematics to children who would never have access to formal education otherwise. His family noticed the pattern first, through absences. Board dinners were missed. Investment portfolios were reviewed late into the night from his car, parked on Osu Lane. His wife, Nadia, confronted him with a lawyer's precision. "You're distracted," she said. "Where are you going every evening?" He could not tell her the truth. How could he explain that in the company of a 12-year-old girl and 7 street children, he had begun to understand what his entire inheritance had failed to teach him, that human value is not measured in net worth? His mother called more frequently. "The family is concerned," she said. "Your brothers want to discuss expansion plans. We're waiting for your leadership." The expansion plans involved purchasing several apartment complexes in the very neighborhood where Amma lived. The residents would be displaced, the buildings would be demolished, a shopping center would rise in their place, profitable and modern, and completely indifferent to the lives it would erase. Kofi attended the presentation meeting. Architects displayed renderings of gleaming storefronts. His CFO outlined the profit margins, 40% within 5 years. His brothers nodded, satisfied. This was growth, this was progress, this was what the Mensah family did. But Kofi saw Amma's face in the architectural drawings. He saw the baobab tree being removed. He saw the children who gathered there scattered across a city that had no room for them. "I have concerns," he said quietly. The room fell silent. His brother Yor leaned forward. "What kind of concerns?" "Displacement concerns, social concerns. We have a responsibility to these communities." Yor laughed, a sound without warmth. "Kofi, since when does the Mensah family concern ourselves with social responsibility? We acquire, we develop, we profit. That is what we do." That evening, Kofi sat beneath the baobab tree and told Amma about the development plans. He expected despair. Instead, she asked a simple question. "What will you do?" Comment where you're watching from. I want to see how far these stories of hope and redemption can travel. Kofi realized in that moment that the answer to that question would determine not just Amma's future, but his own. Chapter 4. The Girl's Gravity. Amma never asked Kofi for help. That was the first thing that struck him about their relationship. It was built on mutual exchange, not obligation. She taught him about survival. He taught her about mathematics and possibility. Neither owed the other anything. Yet both had given everything. She lived in a structure that could not generously be called a home, a shelter cobbled together from corrugated metal and plastic sheeting, in an alley where water collected during rains and created temporary lakes of waste and disease. She shared this space with her mother, who cleaned houses for wealthy families, and her younger brother, who was 7 and had a cough that sounded like breaking glass. When Kofi first visited her home, he understood the calculation of her existence. Every CD her mother earned was allocated, rent for the shelter, food, medicine for her brother's cough. There was no margin for error, no safety net, no inheritance waiting on the other side of survival. "How long have you lived here?" he asked. "Since I was born," Amma replied, as though this was obvious. "My father died when I was small. Mama has worked since then. She wanted me to work too, but I chose school instead. Then school ended." "Why did school end?" "Money." She said this without bitterness. "My teacher said I was the best student he had ever taught, but best students still need fees, so I left." Kofi felt something turn inside his chest, a kind of recognition. This girl, with intelligence that rivaled any student in the private academies where his own children studied, had been erased from the system not because she lacked ability, but because she lacked resources. "I could help you go back," he said. Amma looked at him carefully. "Why would you do that?" "Because it's the right thing to do." She shook her head. "That's not a reason. That's an excuse. Why do you want to do it?" He thought about his honest answer. "Because I've been given so much, and I've given so little." "Then give it to people who deserve it," she said simply. "Not to me, to all of them." She gestured toward the alley where other children moved in the shadows. "Teach them, not just mathematics. Teach them that they're worth something." That night, Kofi sat in his office, the one made of cold glass and silence, and made a decision that would echo through his family's carefully constructed world. He requested a meeting with the board. He did not tell them what he intended to propose. He simply waited until they were all assembled, then spoke. "I want to redirect the Osu Lane project," he said. "Instead of demolition and development, I propose we establish a learning center, a school for children in that community, equipped and staffed, free to attend." The silence was immediate and complete. His uncle spoke first. "Kofi, have you lost your mind? That land is worth millions." "Yes," Kofi agreed, "and I'm choosing to spend it on education instead of profit." Yor's voice was sharp, cutting. "This is not your money to spend. This is family capital. You don't have the authority to make this decision unilaterally." "Actually," Kofi said calmly, "as CEO I do, but he knew the cost would be high." Chapter 5. The Fracture. The family moved against him with the precision of a choreographed strike. That evening his mother called an emergency gathering, not a meeting, a gathering which meant formal, which meant final. They convened in the ancestral home, a sprawling colonial mansion where the Mensah family had plotted their rise for 3 generations. His mother sat at the head of the table. His brothers flanked her on either side. His wife stood near the window, her posture suggesting she had already chosen a side. "You're throwing away our legacy," his mother said, her voice trembling with anger and something deeper, fear that she had raised a son who would not preserve what she had protected. "Everything your grandfather built, everything your father died ensuring would remain stable. You are destroying it for a street child." "I'm not throwing anything away," Kofi replied. "I'm redirecting resources towards something meaningful." "Meaningful," Yor spat the word. "You mean foolish. You mean sentimental. You mean you've fallen in love with some fantasy about saving the poor. Let me tell you something. Brother, the poor don't want to be saved. They want to survive. We provide jobs. We provide growth. That is what they need." "No," Kofi said quietly. "They need what any human needs: dignity, education, a belief that their lives matter." His mother's voice dropped, became something almost gentle. "I am asking you, as your mother, as a woman who bore you and raised you and gave you everything, stop this. Come back. Be the son I raised you to be." Kofi looked at her face, lined with the weight of maintaining empire, and felt something break in him. He loved his mother. He had spent his entire life trying to honor her vision of what a Mensah man should be. But he realized, in that moment, that he could not love her and be himself. He could not honor her vision and honor his own conscience. "I can't," he said. His wife spoke for the first time. "Then I'm leaving you. I didn't marry this version of you. I married a man who understood his responsibilities." "Responsibilities to whom?" he asked. "To you, to the family, or to the children sleeping in the rain?" She turned away. By the end of that week, she had moved into her parents' home. Divorce papers were prepared, their attorneys drafting with clinical efficiency the dissolution of their marriage. His brothers ceased speaking to him entirely. His mother stopped calling. The family had cast him out, not formally but completely. The Mensah dynasty had one less heir. Chapter 6. The Foundation. Despite the rupture, Kofi proceeded. The school was built where the shopping center would have stood. The structure was simple but sturdy, designed for the children of Osu Lane and the surrounding neighborhoods. Solar panels lined the roof. Water collection systems were installed. Classrooms were built without vanity, functional and dignified. Ama became the co-director, working alongside professional educators Kofi hired. She was not yet 13 years old, but her authority with the children was absolute. They trusted her because she lived their lives, spoke their language, understood their calculations of survival. 3 months into the school's opening, 123 children had enrolled. The growth was organic and steady. What surprised Kofi most was not the children's eagerness to learn, but their hunger for it, a kind of desperation to believe that education might be their passageway out of Osu Lane. But success invited scrutiny. Journalists came to interview him about his charity project. They wanted a story about the benevolent billionaire. Kofi resisted the narrative. This was not charity. This was restitution. It was the acknowledgement that a system that created billionaires while children slept in the rain was fundamentally broken. One evening, a journalist asked him directly, "Your family has disowned you over this project. Do you regret it?" Kofi thought of his mother, whom he had not spoken to in 6 months. He thought of his wife, now his ex-wife, living in a penthouse that felt like a cage. He thought of his brothers, calculating his absence from board meetings, already dividing his portions. If this story already touched your heart, hit the like button. It helps Amma's message reach more people who still believe in kindness. "No," he said, "I regret every day before this project. I regret every year I spent accumulating wealth while children like Amma were being erased. I regret that it took falling in love with this community to teach me what my entire inheritance should have taught me, that human worth is immeasurable and a life is valuable only if it is lived in service to others." Chapter 7. The Revelation. The discovery came in the form of an old photograph. A social worker, tracing Amma's family history to verify her enrollment, found it in municipal archives, a registry from 14 years prior. When she brought it to Kofi, confusion clouded her professional composure. "I'm not sure how to present this," she said, "but there's a discrepancy in the records. According to the birth certificate, Amma's biological father is listed as Kwaku Mensah." Kofi did not understand at first. Kwaku was a common name. It took the social worker's gentle clarification for the truth to settle into him. Kwaku Mensah was his brother, his younger brother who had died in a car accident when Amma was barely born. A brother who, it turned out, had fathered a child with a woman from Osu Lane, a relationship the family had successfully buried and forgotten. Kofi sat in silence for a long time, understanding the absolute cruelty of inheritance. Kwaku's daughter had been living 3 kilometers from the family home, growing up in poverty, while her father's brothers counted money they had not earned. She had been teaching mathematics beneath a baobab tree, while her family pretended she did not exist. He told Amma the truth gently. On a quiet evening, beneath the baobab, her initial reaction was not joy or relief, but a kind of profound sadness. "So I'm a Mensah," she said slowly, "and they never looked for me." "No," Kofi replied, "they didn't. But I'm looking for you now. If you want, you don't have to sleep in that shelter anymore. You could live with me, attend university, become whatever you want to become." She considered this with the gravity of someone accustomed to calculating the cost of every choice. "What do you want in return?" she asked. "Nothing," Kofi said. "I want to give you what the family should have given you long ago. Safety, education, and the knowledge that you are valued not for what you can do, but simply because you exist." Amma looked at him for a long moment. "Then I'll stay here," she said finally, "in the shelter, and I'll help more children. That's what I want to return, not wealth, but justice." Chapter 8. The Reckoning. Word of Amma's identity spread through the Mensah family like a virus through an immune system already weakened by Kofi's betrayal. His mother called him, and this time her voice was different, hollow with grief and recognition. "You're telling me Kwaku had a daughter?" "Yes," Kofi said, "and you've had 14 years to find her, and instead the society we built chose not to look." "What do you want from us?" his mother asked. "Nothing," Kofi replied, "but Amma, if she chooses, should have access to her inheritance, to her father's portion of the family wealth, not as charity, but as her right." His mother was quiet for a long moment. "That would devastate your brothers. Their portions would be smaller." "Then let them be smaller," Kofi said. "Let them understand finally that their comfort was built on the erasure of people like Amma." Indeed, when Amma learned that she had inherited substantial wealth, money accumulated from her father's share of the family business, she did something that seemed almost cruel to Kofi at first. She invested almost all of it in expanding the learning center into a full secondary school with dormitory housing. It would serve not just the children of Osu Lane, but orphans and abandoned children throughout Accra. She kept nothing for herself, nothing but a small portion that she used to move her mother into a clean apartment with running water, and to buy medicine for her brother's cough, which finally quieted. "Why didn't you keep any of it?" Kofi asked her. "Because I didn't do anything to earn it," Amma replied. "My father did, my uncle did. I'm just choosing what happens to it. And I choose that children who are like I was, invisible and erased, get to believe they matter." Chapter 9. The Inheritance Reformed. 5 years later, the Mensah family faced a crisis and an opportunity. The original empire was aging, its profits declining as the world moved beyond the industries that had built it. Kofi's brothers, now managing the family holdings, came to him requesting his expertise. Not as a brother, but as a businessman, they were forced to respect. He agreed to consult on one condition, that the family's business model fundamentally change. That profit not be the sole measure of success, that the communities where the Mensah family operated be partners, not simply labor forces to be exploited. His brothers resisted initially, but Yor, now running the company, came one evening to see the school, to witness firsthand what Kofi's betrayal had actually created. He stood in a classroom where Amma, now 17 and brilliant, taught advanced mathematics to students who had entered the program unable to read. He saw their concentration, their hunger, their absolute belief in their own possibility. "This is remarkable," Yor said quietly. "This is what happens," Kofi replied, "when you invest in people instead of exploiting them. This is what legacy actually means." By the end of that year, the Mensah family had implemented a profit-sharing model with the communities they operated in. It was not perfect, and it was not redemption, but it was movement. It was the recognition, finally, that wealth accumulated while others starved was a debt that could only be repaid through radical redistribution of access and opportunity. Kofi's mother visited the school on a Tuesday morning. She stood beneath the baobab tree, now surrounded by a thriving educational sanctuary, and wept. Amma, seeing this woman's grief, went to her with the gravity of someone wise beyond her years and took her hand. "He was a good man," Amma said of her father, Kofi's brother. "He would have wanted this." Kofi's mother nodded, unable to speak, but something shifted in the tectonic plates of her understanding. She had raised sons to preserve empire. What she was learning now was that the greatest empire a human could build was not measured in money or power, but in the transformed lives of those the world had deemed disposable. Kofi stood watching his mother and his niece, the connections that only love and truth could reveal, and understood finally that he had not lost his inheritance. He had simply discovered what it was actually worth. Epilogue. That evening, as rain fell soft and insistent on Accra's streets, Kofi walked with Amma to a small cafe where they had begun the ritual of their Tuesday conversations. She was preparing to enter university, studying education policy and social reform. She would not simply teach the children of Osu Lane, she would rebuild the systems that had erased them. "Thank you." "Undine," she said as they sat in the quiet warmth of the cafe, rain drumming against the windows, "for choosing me, for choosing this." Kofi looked at her, this girl who had owned nothing and taught him everything, and realized that gratitude flowed in both directions. "Thank you for saving me," he said, "for teaching me that the greatest fortune is not what you inherit, but what you choose to give away." Lei. And in that moment, beneath the sound of rain and the hum of ordinary life, they understood the truest inheritance of all. That one act of kindness, one choice to see the invisible, one decision to value human worth over wealth, these are the only legacies that matter. These are the only stories that echo beyond a single lifetime. These are the only inheritances that transform the world. The rain continued, falling on the rich and poor alike, washing the city clean. And in its rhythm, both lives, the billionaire who learned to empty himself and the girl who learned she had always been full, beat like a single redemptive heart.